What's up, family? I'm Kef Ray, and this is Back to the Basic. Today's video is about gender, but not just gender in itself, but who decides the gender of the child, mothers or fathers. Stay tuned. Welcome to Back to the Basics, where you learn facts, hope you embrace it. Watch, like, share, bring in awareness. Watch, like, share, bring in awareness. I'm fearless. Welcome to Back to the Basics, where you learn facts, hope you embrace it. Watch, like, share, bring in awareness. Watch, like, share, bring in. Before we get into this topic, we first have to know what is gender. The word gender etymologically derives from the Latin word genus, meaning to give birth, procreate, beget, or generate. To the general public, gender and sex is often seen as the same thing, but in truth, they are not. The word gender has a more general meaning than the term sex, which only refers to the physical distinction between males and females. Sex is merely a manifestation of gender on the physical plane. So, there is a distinction. Gender is solely that of creating, producing, and generating, and its manifestation is visible on every plane of existence, including the spiritual or etheric realm. Now, in the most ancient Greek teaching, when it comes to electricity, they would always identify electrical phenomena with gender, and they have always identified the masculine aspect of gender with the positive pole and the feminine aspect of gender with the negative pole. To us, ancient Egyptians, we have always identified both as negative and positive. But because the Greeks' teaching dominates modern society, the public has inherited a false impression regarding the quality of the so-called negative pole of electrical matters. The word positive etymologically means that which can be confirmed, or reality, and negative etymologically means unreality. We ancients knew that these two words are wrongfully applied to this subject matter. Nothing is further from the real facts. The so-called negative pole of a battery is really the pole in and by which the generation or productions of new forms of energy is manifested, and so there's really nothing negative about it. Scientists now use the word cathode in place of negative and anode in the place of positive. The word cathode etymologically means a way down or descent, which is the path of generation, and the word anode etymologically means upward, for it deals with influence. In our ancient Egyptian culture, these were known as the forces of heaven and earth, which are now known as the centripetal and the centrifugal forces. And so, for the remainder of this dissertation, we insist upon replacing the word feminine in the place of negative, and speaking of the pole of creative activities, and masculine for the influencing energy that works with the feminine to make things happen. Let us now examine the doctrine of gender amongst the subatomic particles. The smallest particle known to date is the quarks, which has a weight of 0, being lighter than the hydrogen atom, which has a weight of 1, making quarks the spiritual or etheric realm. Quarks represents the masculine principle of gender, for it is the father of all energies, and it was birthed by the splitting of biaps, which represents the feminine principle of gender, for it is the mother of all energies. So, you see, from the feminine pole comes a swarm of subatomic particles in the spiritual or etheric realm. Now, the clustering of feminine particles such as biaps around a positive one such as quarks constitute the basis of an atom. The masculine quarks exerts a certain influence upon the feminine biaps, causing certain subatomic combinations, and thus creates or generates protons and electrons, which constitute the basis of the hydrogen atom in the physical plane. Now, the birth of this new atom is composed of smaller particles such as protons, which has a positive charge representing the masculine principle of gender, and electrons representing the feminine principle of gender. So, this detaching and uniting of subatomic particles form the basis of the greater part of the activities of the chemical world. But when a feminine particle unites with a masculine particle, a certain process is begun. The feminine particle vibrates rapidly under the influence of the masculine energy and circles it rapidly, as in the case of electrons circling the proton. The feminine particle always actively seeks a union with a masculine particle, being urged by its natural impulse to create new forms of matter or energy. Now, atoms such as carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and phosphorus constitute the basis of DNA, which leads us into cells. Now, on a cellular level, a single parent cell that is composed of both genders in the very beginning divides into two daughter cells. not son cells, but daughter cells, to become what we all are today. In some forms of life, the two doctrines of gender, both masculine and feminine, are combined in one organism, and this is how humans also started. And the best kept secret is that the woman is first and the man came from her. And this is seen in the mitochondrial DNA. Nevertheless, in the process of creation, the masculine principle of gender is ever present, working inside of the female. It is clear that the male needs the female more than she needs him, for she is the mother of created things. The part of the masculine doctrine, however, seems to be that of directing a certain inherent energy towards the feminine doctrine, and thus starting into activity the creative processes. But the feminine principle is the one always doing the active creative work, and yet each doctrine is incapable of operating without the assistance of the other. Let me say that again. Each doctrine is incapable of operating without the assistance of the other. Everything manifests both the masculine and feminine gender. There's always the masculine present in the feminine form, and thus they both are necessary for the production and manifestation of various forms of energy. Now, when a male and female comes together, sexually that is, you must realize that the doctrine of growth is in process, meaning each child is grown, procreated, and thus generated in the womb of one of the sexes of gender, namely the mother, who control birth and what is born in her womb. With that being said, she decides the gender of the child, and without her, we would all not be in the flesh. Because of sexual reproduction, which enhances the virility and health of the gene pool, she was necessary for the kind of complex evolution that produced the human species. You will find that earlier ancient cultures, such as ours, were all matriarchal for this very reason. Now, the idea of creating does not come into play until reason, opinion, and decisions are made. And so, the birth process is called conception, which is an idea derived from specific instances that includes the male who determines the sex of the child, depending on whether his sperm cells are carrying an X or Y chromosome. Remember, a woman's sex chromosome is XX, so if the father's X chromosome combines with the mother's X chromosome, it makes a baby girl with XX chromosome. And if the father's Y chromosome combines with the mother's X chromosome, it makes a baby boy with XY chromosome, whose mind and body are one in gender. What most don't know is, when a woman is with child, it is a very delicate period for the mother and the developing fetus, especially if the child's sex is male. You see, what happened is the father's chromosome, whether X or Y, directs a certain inherent energy towards the mother, starting the creative processes, which has already started in the female, called ovulation. Since the woman causes the physical development biologically intrinsic to all mammals, when a child is being grown in her sacred garden, the pattern that unfolds is in the absence of any hormonal influence, yet by way of emotional influences. And so, when the woman is emotionally stable, her body naturally secretes the hormones necessary for the proper brain chemistry that aligns with the proper sex so that the child's mind and body are one in gender. Now, there are situations where the child's mind and body are not one in gender. That means that they can be born with the gender or spirit of a woman in the body of a man, or they can be born with the gender or spirit of a man in the body of a woman. Now, this happens before they are born, and this is why those who are born like this sometimes go out their way to get a sex change, which may appear extreme to you, but they are not satisfied until their mind and their body are one in gender. Allow me to explain how this happens scientifically, for this is a very sensitive topic. Now, in a case where a male's gender is living in a female body, what happens is at the beginning of the development of a zygote, depending on what is going on emotionally with the mother, sometimes only a small amount of testosterone is secreted. I'm talking just enough to make testes form on the developing embryo, but not enough to exercise proper brain chemistry and pituitary gland balance, and thus homosexuality occurs naturally. So, there you have it. Gender, the generating force, is in everything, and on the physical plane, the mother decides it. and without it, we would not be in the flesh. I'm Kef Ray, and this is Back to the Basic. Like, share, and subscribe. Facts we stated. You wanna know something? Go back to basics. Most saw a trap and was called the Matrix. The world frivolized, yet it's hard to face it. So I spread truth, hope you embrace it.